I'm Vicky Draper. I'm a physio and team lead for the Harrogate Community Stroke Team, and I'm, as Matt said, his clinical lead for rehab for the ISDN. And I've got the, I won't say dubious, I've got the honour of facilitating a panel of experts this morning. So we are going to try and be strict for time, but equally I don't want to cut you off too much either. So I'll sit. What we wanted to do was make sure that there was an opportunity for everyone in the room to try and have a little bit better understanding of what it's like for someone who has lived experience of stroke, and the emphasis being on the experience. And we want it to be positive if it can be, and we also want it to allow you some take-home messages about how we can maybe change our services a little bit in a way that Michelle's just talked about, that suits the individual rather than suits the structures and routines and sometimes rigidity that we have in place as services, which I know we all struggle against, but sometimes are bound by. And that's really challenging, I think, for us to break through. But hopefully with a move in the last few years to more qualitative information and lived experience, hopefully we can maybe take some of Robert, Bruce and Judy's experiences with us away today to help model our services slightly differently. So the question really for you all is, what can we do differently tomorrow because of what we hear today? So I'm going to start with Robert and Bruce and let them introduce themselves because they'll do it much more eloquently than I can. So if I let you, Robert, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Robert Minton-Taylor. I've had a background in journalism, public relations and university lecturing. I'm now retired, so I work mainly for stroke and cancer associations and not-for-profit organisations too.
Thank you.
I'm Bruce Yardley, and I had a career as an academic. I was a professor of earth sciences, and I was the government's senior geologist for radioactive waste management for a while. But I had the stroke after I'd retired.
Hi, I'm Judy Hinton. I'm a carer for my husband who had a stroke in 2014, and I'm a trustee of aphasia support.
So we'll play a bit of pass the microphone this morning as well. So the first question for you, Robert, and then Bruce, is when you had your stroke and thinking about those first few hours and days in your acute phase, what do you remember? Or even what do you not remember that someone's told you afterwards?
I remember being in a hyperacute stroke unit at Bradford Royal Infirmary and having this death dream of my life passing before me from my days in Berlin 1940s to my current life pre-COVID. So that was my main memory, really.
Okay, thank you. And Bruce?
I've got a fairly clear memory of the process, but what is, I should say, this was September 2020, and so COVID restrictions were enforced. But I certainly have a very clear memory of feeling tired. I was very tired before the stroke. I've been being like a typical 70-year-old in denial and thinking you could carry on doing what you always did. And so I felt very tired. And I just wanted to be allowed to go to sleep. That's the main recollection, really.
And that feels like me most days, to be honest, wanting to just go to sleep. Not like that, no, and I appreciate that. Okay, thank you. And gosh, both really very different experiences and memories, but probably quite frightening, I'm sure. So thinking on that, in that moment of need, can you remember anything that a member of staff or teams of staff did that helped in that early days?
When I left Bradford Royal Infirmary, I spent about 4 weeks on the stroke ward at Airedale Hospital. And what I do remember is the incredible care that I got. I think I'm a pretty lazy person, so being a bloke, I was being dragged out of bed every day to do physiotherapy. I couldn't stand up and I couldn't walk. I kept my speech, but I couldn't either. wash or feed myself. So you can see the state I'm in today, which is my stroke in September 2019. I'm pretty good. And that's all down to the rehabilitation team, the physiotherapy. I mean, they literally dragged me out of bed and said, "I'm sorry, Robert, we're going to spend 45 minutes doing physio, whether you like it or not." Because like Bruce, all I wanted to do was sleep all day. I did not want to get out of bed.
And I'll come to you in a second, Bruce, with the same question. But in that moment, was that a good thing?
Well, it was only a good thing after I left the hospital and realised in what condition I was, because, I mean, look, reflecting back on it, that was transformational, including the occupational therapy. I remember being taken by the occupational therapist and said, "Well, you can't go home until we've gone to Morrison's and you start getting things off the shelf and you actually go through a checkout desk and you can pick up the goods, put them in your bag, and you can go home again and buy a railway ticket." I mean, I just thought it was rather stupid on the day when that happened, but looking back on it, that it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, I cannot thank the NHS enough, and that's why I'm working with them today, I guess.
I think we all need help going through a supermarket checkout most of the time. And Bruce, similarly, in that moment where you said you were so tired, you wanted to go to sleep in those early days, what was it that you remember that really helped in those first few moments of your stroke, first few days and weeks?
I mean, I think it took me about 2 days. I went into hospital having just had a TIA, and after 2 days of feeling terrible and not being able to sleep, I finally got to sleep. And when they kept doing these little tests, making me touch my nose, and after 2 days, I'd lost the ability to do anything at all. My hand was just a claw, and my arm had to be supported. So it's doing a bit better now. But so that was quite an interesting position to find yourself. But the upside was I didn't feel tired anymore. So that was good. And I would also say that the most helpful, useful thing that happened was the visits from the physio. And I was in the LGI during COVID for 5 weeks, during which time I got half an hour of physio visit every 3 times a week. And that was it. And so those were the things that I looked forward to that were really helpful. And otherwise, I stayed alive. I could feed myself as long as they didn't give me things in little plastic packets. But other than that, yeah, it was the time of COVID, so I never got sent to a recovery ward. As soon as literally I had walked up and down the stairs once, I'd walked back and forth along a corridor, shuffling with a quad stick, and I was immediately taken home to be seen how I could survive in the home environment, and I was scooted out of the door before I could get COVID, basically.
Thank you. And I'm sure there are members of staff that stick in your mind as well that were really influential in those early days. So on the flip side of that, can you recall anything that was particularly confusing or frightening or a bad memory of that time in those earlier days?
Yeah, I think I concur with Bruce. Was I ever going to get better? And I think the other thing which I was really worried about, my spouse is a former intensive care unit nurse, and therefore I knew that she knew exactly what she was going to have to deal with. And I was more worried. I think as a patient, you have to, I mean, you're not in a position to do much apart from, you know, the incredible care you get from the NHS. So you're pretty passive from that point of view. But worrying about the future, was I going to be able to do the things I wanted to do? I think that was the most scary thing. And also, how would it impact on my friends and family? I can talk about a bit later about the mental health aspects, which were really quite frightening.
Okay. And for you, Bruce, what was the most frightening thing about those early phases?
I don't remember being particularly frightened, although there were some fairly unpleasant fellow residents of the ward occasionally. I was being moved around every day or two, sometimes twice a day at times. So I wouldn't say that there was anything particularly frightening about it, but I was very keen to get on and have physio, and yet I was only getting 3 half-hour sessions a week. So my wife, of her own bat, had already found out about a private physio that I could start going to as soon as I left. So that, again, yeah, I'd agree that the scare was just how quickly can I get going, particularly because I've been quite falsely told that if you don't get your improvement will only last for 3 to 6 months. Now, this is complete bollocks. I'm here today wearing lace-up shoes, which I tie myself. I've only been doing that for the last year. So it took 4.5 years to get to that point. You're improving all the time.
Thank you. Brilliant. In the interest of time, I'm going to pop to Judy and we'll come back to some of those other thoughts. So that's a really nice segue, actually. What was the impact going to be on my family and friends? And I think, Judy, if you're happy to talk to us a little bit about stroke from your perspective. So just tell me a bit about the moment you realised that life was going to be different.
Thank you. It was actually on the day of my husband's stroke, and me and the family were waiting in the waiting room. It seemed it was for hours. We'd been told that it was unclear whether my husband would live or die, so we were in that waiting position. And finally his condition stabilised, and they said that they believed he would survive the night. And then the consultant came and he outlined what life would be like from then on. I don't think I took that in straight away because it was an intense relief that he was going to live. And I remember my eldest son had to spell it out to me later on. This meant that your life will be like this from now on. And also, about 4 or 5 days in, when he was on the ward, we had a second revelation when my brother had kindly bought an iPad and some speech apps, and we proudly brought it into the hospital and put it in front of my husband, thinking, here's your voice, type it in and we'll hear what you have to say, only to find out that he couldn't spell and he couldn't read, and that was absolutely devastating.
That sounds really hard, really awful. Yeah. Thinking about those early days and all that information that you'd been given and coming to terms with the future, did you feel included in conversations by the staff that were working with you and your husband? Did you feel involved in planning?
I'm pleased to say we felt absolutely included in all the therapies. Right from the beginning, we were asked about my husband's hobbies and interests, about his previous lifestyle, and the information we gave was harnessed to his care. We used his love of music in physio. He was hoisted from the ceiling, and while he was hoisted, we had his favourite music playing. My son provided some drumsticks, and he was drumming to the beat of the music on a biscuit tin. Also, when he got to rehab, again, we were well included. We were invited along to speech sessions. We were encouraged to bring in family photos and things of special event family times, and use those in the speech sessions. We were encouraged to learn about supported conversations. We went to a lot of physiotherapy sessions. Me and 2 of my children learned how to do car transfers, and we all learned how to mount stairs, and we felt really, really included. My eldest son went to all the community physio appointments with my husband. So yes, that was a really good experience.
Keep hold of that a minute, Judy. I can project. What's the hardest part of caring for someone after a stroke that maybe professionals, clinicians, people not in your shoes might not realise?
I think it could be the outside pressures, aside from the pressures of the patient care. You would potentially have financial pressure, particularly if your husband has or partner has a stroke whilst they're working. And then naturally one has to pick up all the chores that your other half did in the home. Immediately they fall upon your shoulders. You have to keep the household going. And all this is happening while you're trying to visit in hospital and help with the therapies.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So moving on, I'll just get my prompt sheet that Matt kindly did for me. Couple of questions for all three of you, really. What do you think are the biggest gaps at the moment between that transition from hospital into the community? Try and keep it to one each, if possible, just for the interest of time. But if we have time, we'll elaborate later. So the biggest gap between hospital to home, Robert?
The complete lack of primary care. I mean, apart from having a stroke, I'm a stage 4 prostate cancer patient, and I get a call from my surgery every week, see how I am, on the drugs I'm on. I get a Macmillan nurse calling me. I get the Hodder unit, the Airedale Hospital calling me, inviting me in. I have a 3-monthly review with my consultant oncologist. And I remember being discharged from Airedale and thinking, what's going to happen now? I had nothing. And indeed, I'm meeting tomorrow the senior partner for Modality Partnership, which I think claims to be one of the biggest super group GP surgeries in Britain. He thinks I'm going to be seeing him to talk about his complaints about Airedale Hospital, but I want to talk to him about the complete lack of continuity between discharge from hospital and stroke services operated by GPs. I don't even know if Modality have a stroke specialist. I mean, I've been called up by a vascular specialist. I have an annual review and all sorts of things, even though I had a bleed on the brain. So, I mean, it's just stroke is a Cinderella of compared to cancer care in all sorts of ways. From writing stuff, I do a column in the Yorkshire Post. They're interested in how much cancer care costs and everything else. Stroke, well, it's not. It's for old people, isn't it? It's not really sexy, is it, Robert?
Yeah, I concur. Beautifully put, Bruce. Biggest gap between hospital and community?
Yeah, I'm probably going to go over your one. There are some gaps, and I think that one of the things that really I noticed was that I needed to be triggered to do things. You get institutionalized in hospital, and when I came home, I had another day while my wife was sorting things out in the house, ready to have me back, barely able to walk around. And so she said, since I had a smartphone with me and there was reception in the hospital, she said, we don't have a single bed. You're going to have to sleep downstairs. Can you see if you can find a bed and get it delivered the day after when you come home? And I just remember thinking that was an overwhelmingly big ask. But she was quite right. I was sitting in the hospital, the sort of thing I would have been happy to do 6 weeks earlier. So I got on the phone and I found a bed company that could actually let us have a bed immediately and could send someone around and deliver it. Job done. And that was an incredible lift to my spirits. It really made a difference to actually find that, no, you're not just stuck in a hospital waiting for people to do things. And the other, that continued a few months later, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so suddenly my stroke wasn't the biggest thing in the household. And I had to step up and support her. And we had a pretty dreadful year over the next year, but we came through it and everything's looking good.
I'm really pleased to hear that your wife's doing well. Judy, same question for you. What do you think's the biggest gap between leaving hospital and into community?
think the biggest gap is in hospital, you're cocooned and supported. There's always somebody on hand that you can ask. When you get at home, you feel totally cut off, apart from the planned appointments that you might have as outpatients. You're at home and you think, what do I do now?
Yeah. So they're quite similar, actually, aren't they? That feeling of everything's been done for me, but actually maybe I could do things for myself. So I think on that note then, what would you say to the people in this room? What could we do differently that might ease not just that gap, but your experiences? What would make a difference? What would make it a little bit better? Robert.
I was very lucky because on the ward I was on, there was a wonderful manager of the ward called Shinta Joseph, and she came to me after about a week on the ward and said, why don't you get off your backside? You used to be a journalist. Why don't you write a blog? You got a smartphone. Go and start writing a blog. So I did, and I wrote a blog every week. Some of them were published by the Yorkshire Post. I think that really, I realised that her instructions to me were really, really helpful, because actually she had figured out, having been a university lecturer, that I was going to, I'm a thinker rather than a, sports person. And that was really, really beneficial. And I continue to this day. I think the thing about, the really big concern I had when I left, and maybe I'm jumping too far, was mental health. 6 months after I left, discharge, I had terrible depression. I mean, questions started rising. Why am I still alive? Why can I talk? Why can I stand up? How come I can walk and do things that other people on the stroke ward couldn't do? I remember I was very fortunate to get into talking therapies offered by Bradford, and that was incredible. This was during COVID, so I had 12 weeks from a wonderful psychologist, a Spanish psychologist woman who was incredibly fantastic. That because after my stroke, I had these terrible dreams. I was abused and bullied at boarding school, and so my brain, all these drawers had opened in my brain, which she dragged out and dealt with. But had it not been for that, I would have probably jumped in front of a Northern Rail train. I really was that depressed, and I know my family was really concerned about it. So I think, please, can we not have a resident psychologist on a stroke ward? I think that's really important when it hits home when you're discharged. About, like Bruce, we both intelligent, people. We need something to support us. And I go back to the cancer thing. I am getting calls every week asking me how I am and from cancer support specialists, etc. From Prostate Cancer UK, I get a monthly call. I get one from Yorkshire Cancer Research. I get an email saying, how can we help? How can you help us? Etc. But I think really stroke is a Cinderella.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing what's obviously been a traumatic journey. And I think there's a lot of work at the moment in other services as well around trauma-informed care. And I think that's definitely an area that we all need to be looking into more and being very mindful of. But I completely echo your thoughts around psychology embedded within the whole pathway, not just in certain pockets of the pathway. Bruce, similarly for you, what would your request be to people in the room to consider doing a little bit differently?
Well, for me, I just wanted to get more physio because I wanted to get better and keep doing things, because 70 is still quite young. And so really my message is that you need all the physio you can get. When I was discharged, I got a letter saying that they'd looked carefully at my case, and I was entitled to 6 hours of physio and 6 hours of OT, and that would be repeated after 6 months. Now, to put that into perspective, I've probably paid for 450 hours of physio to get in the state that I'm now, and I would still expect to go back from time to time and see how things are going. And I think long-range physio support is equally important, because as you start using things and getting things moving, you don't always get things right every time. And you don't necessarily need a one-on-one long session. You need to just be able to be somewhere where someone will say, look, I think you'll find you ought to be moving your ankle in this way, or trying to move your wrist like that, and then it'll all get better. None of these things are quick, and you really have to understand how slow it will be. So teaching people that this is a slow process. For me, the analogy was my young grandchild learning to walk after 3 years was actually still pretty bad at it, objectively. And that sort of view, you realise you've got to be patient, but you need to have the opportunity, and even if it's just a walk-in session, that you can be exercising with other people around and a physio's there, the sort of thing that friends with heart problems can routinely do. It would be nice if we had that too.
So that's interesting. That echoes a lot of what Michelle was talking about around the models we offer and around matched care and how it isn't a one-size-fits-all. And yes, we all experience very tricky situations with our resource that's made available to us, and it's how we deliver that in a way that we deem equitable. But it sounds like there's definitely food for thought around individualising what that offer looks like. Thank you. Judy, what would your ask be to the people in the room about your experiences and maybe something that could be done differently?
I would say to you that while your focus is on the patient, I would spare a thought for the health and well-being of the carer, because a happy and relaxed carer means a happy and relaxed patient. And let's face it, we're the ones that take over when you guys knock off or go on holiday. We're there. We're trying to encourage and support our loved one to achieve the best that they can be. So if you look after us, we can look after them. Thank you.
Well, I think that was a perfect summary, Judy, and I don't think we need to say anything else at all. So with great thanks and delight.
Can I just
yes,
say one other thing?
There is something else to say.
Sorry. I sat in a meeting last week of securing the future for the new 1 billion or 1.5 billion new hospital for Airedale NHS Trust. The new hospital, the Hospital 2.0, which is the national model, there is no indication, she said, that space for rehab is included, which I find quite shocking. So we're going to have individual, ensuite bedrooms for patients and rest areas, but no rehab space. I mean, it's something I want to question at the next governor's meeting with the board. I just find that absolutely gobsmacking. So I'd ask all of you to go out and ensure that any new builds, if you're involved here, does include rehab space. I mean, I just can't understand that at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you are around for a little bit. We're going to go for a coffee break now, 10 to 15 minutes. And 10 minutes. Tea and coffee's out here. Please don't fall over each other in the scramble to get out. And I think a round of applause. Thank you very much indeed.